No one saw them coming. Not the farmers, not the hunters, not even the authorities. It started with strange sounds in the night, heavy footsteps, fences snapping, something moving just beyond the darkness. By morning, entire fields were destroyed, crops flattened, soil torn apart, and deep claw marks left behind like a warning. At first, people thought it was just a few wild animals, but then the numbers kept growing. Dozens turned into hundreds, and soon, thousands of wild boars were moving like an unstoppable force. They weren't just destroying farms anymore. They were entering villages, charging at anything in their path, even attacking hunters sent to stop them. Traps were set, guns were ready, but nothing seemed to slow them down. And then one hunt changed everything, when a massive boar refused to run and instead turned back to fight. What began as a distant problem quickly turned into a national crisis. Across South Korea, reports of wild boar destruction were rising at an alarming pace. Farms that once produced stable harvests were suddenly left barren overnight. Entire fields of rice, corn, and vegetables were ripped apart by powerful tusks as the animals searched for food. Farmers who depended on these crops for survival watched helplessly as months of hard work disappeared in a single night. The economic impact was devastating, with losses reaching hundreds of millions of dollars and continuing to climb as the population of wild boars grew rapidly each year. But the real fear began when these animals pushed beyond farmland and moved closer to human settlements. Suburban areas and even city edges started to experience unexpected encounters. Parks, gardens, and public spaces were no longer safe. Wild boars were seen roaming streets at night, knocking over trash bins, damaging property, and in some cases, charging directly at people. The situation escalated further when hunters sent to control the population began reporting dangerous confrontations. These were not ordinary animals running away from humans. Many of them were aggressive, unpredictable, and willing to fight back when cornered. Authorities realized that traditional hunting methods were not enough to control such large numbers. A more organized and systematic approach was needed. This led to the introduction of large-scale trapping systems designed specifically for wild boars. Thousands of spring traps were deployed across mountainous regions and rural borders where boar activity was highest. These traps were carefully engineered to hold the animal firmly in place once triggered, preventing escape even with the animal's immense strength. Hunters underwent specialized training to properly install and manage these traps. Each trap required precise placement, knowledge of animal movement patterns, and constant monitoring. Unlike simple hunting, this method demanded patience and discipline. Every day, hunters had to travel through rough terrain, checking each trap multiple times to ensure effectiveness and safety. A single mistake could mean losing the opportunity to capture a boar or facing a dangerous encounter with an injured animal. Despite the challenges, this strategy began to show results. In certain regions, the wild boar population dropped significantly within a short period. Areas that once reported thousands of sightings saw numbers decline rapidly. Farmers started noticing improvements as crop damage decreased, and local communities slowly regained a sense of control. But even with these successes, the threat was far from over, because the surviving boars were becoming more cautious, more aggressive, and much harder to catch. As the trapping operations expanded deeper into remote regions, hunters quickly realized that the situation was far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The wild boars that remained were no longer careless animals wandering into traps. These were survivors, stronger, smarter, and far more aggressive after months of constant pressure. Every step into the forest now carried real risk, and every trap check could turn into a life-threatening encounter within seconds. Early one freezing morning, a team of experienced hunters moved into a dense mountain zone where several traps had been triggered overnight. The area was silent, unnaturally quiet, with no birds calling and no wind moving through the trees. It was a kind of silence that made every hunter alert, every sense sharpened. They approached the first trap cautiously, expecting to find a captured animal. But what they saw immediately changed everything. The trap had been violently torn apart, the heavy steel mechanism twisted and buried into the ground as if it had been crushed by pure force. Whatever had been caught, there was no ordinary boar. Moments later, the sound came, deep, heavy breathing from somewhere within the thick brush ahead. The team froze. One hunter slowly raised his rifle, scanning the shadows. Then, without warning, the bushes exploded. A massive boar charged out at full speed, its long tusks gleaming, and its eyes filled with pure aggression. There was no hesitation, no warning signal, just raw power moving straight toward them. The hunters reacted instantly. A shot rang out, then another, but the animal didn't stop. It kept coming, tearing through branches, closing the distance with terrifying speed. At the last possible second, a coordinated burst of fire dropped the boar just meters away from the front line. The ground shook as its heavy body slammed into the earth. For a moment, no one moved. The reality of how close they had come to disaster settled in. Incidents like this were becoming more frequent. Reports of injured hunters were rising, with many suffering serious wounds from sudden attacks. These animals had adapted to human strategies. They learned to avoid certain paths, detect trap placements, and even return to destroy traps after escaping them. The balance had shifted. This was no longer just population control. It had become a dangerous battle of intelligence and survival between humans and one of the most resilient animals in the wild. And as winter continued, the situation only grew more intense. Food sources became scarce, pushing the remaining boars closer to human territory once again. The line between safety and danger was getting thinner with every passing day. What the hunters didn't know yet was that the biggest confrontation was still ahead. By the time the final phase of the operation began, exhaustion had already set in. Days of constant tracking, trap inspections, and high-risk encounters had pushed every hunter to their limit. But there was no option to stop. Reports were coming in faster than ever. Entire crop fields destroyed overnight, fresh tracks appearing dangerously close to residential areas, and multiple sightings of unusually large boars leading aggressive sounders deeper into human territory. This was no longer just containment. It had become a race against time. The command teams made a critical decision. Instead of spreading out, they would concentrate all available hunters into one coordinated push targeting the largest remaining herd, a group believed to be responsible for the majority of recent destruction. Drones were deployed at first light, scanning the frozen terrain from above. What they found was alarming. Deep within a narrow valley, partially hidden by dense forest and rocky ridges, a massive concentration of movement was detected. Dozens of heat signatures, tightly grouped, constantly shifting. This was it, the main herd. The plan was simple, but incredibly dangerous. Teams would form a wide perimeter, slowly closing in to prevent escape, while trained dogs would pressure the herd from behind. Every movement had to be precise. One mistake, one gap, an entire herd could break through, scattering into nearby farmland and making the situation even worse. As the operation began, Tension spread through the line. Snow crunched under boots. Breath turned to mist in the freezing air. Radio stayed almost silent. Then, from deep in the valley, the first sound echoed, a low, collective rumble. The herd had sensed something. Seconds later, chaos erupted. The ground seemed to come alive as dozens of wild boars burst forward, crashing through trees, scattering snow and dirt into the air. Some ran straight into the perimeter, while others attempted to break through weaker points in the line. Hunters fired in controlled bursts, trying to stop the movement without losing position. The noise was overwhelming. Gunshots, barking dogs, thunder of hooves shaking the earth. Then came the moment no one was prepared for. From the center of the herd, a massive dominant boar emerged, larger than anything they had seen before. It didn't run. It charged, straight toward the narrowest part of the line. Two hunters barely had time to react before it slammed into their position, knocking one of them violently to the ground. For a split second, everything slowed. The boar stood over him, tusks inches away, ready to strike. Shots rang out from both sides. Precise, controlled, desperate. The animal staggered but still resisted, its sheer strength refusing to give in. It took multiple hits before it finally collapsed, just moments before the situation could have turned fatal. The fallen hunter was quickly pulled back, shaken but alive. It was a close call, too close. When the dust finally settled, the valley fell silent again. The operation had succeeded. The largest herd had been neutralized, and the immediate threat to nearby communities was finally reduced. But no one celebrated. Every hunter standing there understood the truth. This wasn't the end. The forests were still vast. The conditions that allowed the population to grow still existed. And somewhere out there, more herds were already adapting, learning, and preparing to survive. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over.